This fermentation room is a space which is dedicated to the brewing of the McAuslan products. And as you can see by looking at the vessels, they're all open top fermenters, and so of different sizes. So that means that the fermentation takes place, in contact with the atmospheric air above it. Ale yeast, which we're using a very old ale yeast we acquired from Great Britain. It's used to operating in open fermenters, and obviously at one point in its history would have fermented in wooden fermenters prior to the development of stainless steel. It's a very aggressive yeast. It's a very assertive yeast, both in its ability to ferment and its flavor profile. It's notwithstanding the fact that the atmosphere is open, if there's any sort of airborne material that drops in, the yeast is so powerful and takes over a fermentation in such a way that that's not an issue. The consistent underlying flavor of all of our beers comes from the yeast, that really is the trademark. If there is a trademark of this brewery, it's that. Maintaining that tradition is part of the McAuslan brewing tradition, notwithstanding that the cleaning of these vessels still requires people to enter the tanks and to manually scrub the cooling coils and the vessel throughout. We think that it's part of the character of our beers that yeast will respond to its environment, and we never wanted to change the environment. Another interesting thing about our yeast is that we started with this yeast strain back in 1989, and it's never been changed. In other words, we've never gone back to the original yeast sample that we had. We have obviously got that in yeast banks, and it's protected. But we basically harvest the yeast off the top of a fermentation, and that goes into the next fermentation. And so having both a good environment for the yeast to operate in is very, very important. This space is separate. We don't want to have an air exchange. It has its own separate air. The filtered air system, the pressure in this room is higher than the pressure outside of it, so that we don't suck any strange yeast from the lager side of the operation into this room. So this is very unusual. I'd say this is perhaps the most distinguishing feature from a production point of view of the McAuslan beers compared to the great majority of Canadian or North American brewers, for that matter. It's a company that's been here since the 1880s. It was called Standard Chemical, and it's been providing chemicals to all sorts of industries for well more than 100 years now, 130, 140 years. I don't think that building will last for another 5 years, though. I think they'll be turning this space into housing. The large building behind it is the first of the Canada malting plants that was built on the side of the canal here in Lachine, rather here in St. Henry, but beside the Lachine Canal. And it was built in 1903. And being here, having been in this area for as long as I have, there used to be a rail spur. Bulk would come in. They would often ship finished product by boat. Some went down the Lachine Canal down to the Caribbean, served breweries and distilleries in many parts of the Caribbean and the East Coast. So it was really part of our Canadian brewing history, that building. It hasn't been used since the 1970s, and it's been abandoned for far too long, unfortunately. I also, much to my regret, I think it will be gone in another 5 years as well. This part of the city was a very important industrial part. It was really the heartland of Canadian industry well up until the 1950s, and went into decline shortly thereafter. There were 30,000 jobs within about a mile and a half on either side of the canal from where we stand back in the 1950s. So it was a very, very important industrial center. So this is the Terrasse Saint-Amoise, as it's called, and it's right by the Lachine Canal, and which is now a 9-mile long Canadian national park. The canal was there prior to the famous Seaway And so any goods coming into the interior of Canada from the St. Lawrence River had to pass by this spot. The canal closed in the 1970s, has been reopened in around 2000 for pleasure boat traffic. There's about 2 million people go by this site every summer on bike, rollerblades, running, and so on and so forth. And obviously we try to gather a few of them in here to have a beer and a barbecued sausage or hamburger or whatever. This site is also used for a lot of musical entertainment festivals, film festivals, and so on and so forth. We think it's very important to create a link between the community and the brewery. This is kind of, in a lot of ways, our public face. This is the way we like to speak to our consumers, and we like to do a lot of charity activity here to raise money for many different sorts of things. We have the two abreast rowing team in the dragon boats. They work out just beyond this set of locks here, and they come here frequently and raise money for breast cancer research and other particular things. So this is a way that we have people taste our beer, get to know who we are, and we can sort of do something of value for the community. We think that's very important.